Hey everybody, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. My name's Heath, Holme, Ableton trainer and point blank Ibiza music instructor. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you how to use Ableton's Impulse drum instrument to make some cool percussion. So yeah, let's get started. First thing I'm going to do is come over to the left hand side of my Ableton session view and click on this little circle here with the arrow to open up the browser menu, and I'm going to scroll down to the section categories and the title instruments. I'm going to click on that title to open up the available instruments, and by default, when I find the instrument I'm looking for, if I'm to click and drag the title of that instrument over onto a MIDI track, I will get a default blank initialized patch, and that's exactly what I want in this case, is a blank impulse. So I'm going to click on that and drag myself an impulse over onto this empty MIDI track. As you can see down the bottom here, I now have myself an Ableton live drum instrument, the Impulse drum instrument down the bottom here with all of its 8 pads empty and available to use. So I'm now going to look for some nice percussion sounds to use on these 8 pads. So I'm going to come back over again to my browser to the left hand side, scroll down to places, and in my case I have a folder titled sample library. I'll click on that folder and look inside of it for a sample pack that contains some percussion sounds. In this case, I'm going to pick on this Wave Recordings Techno Organic. I'm going to click on the left here to open it up, and I'm going to look down through the results here for the folder titled Single Hits. I'm going to click on the left again to open that up further, and now I have another folder found in the results called Perks. So I'm going to click on the left to open that up, and inside here I have something like around 54 different percussion sounds that I could now load onto these 8 impulse pads. So I'm going to start fairly randomly and just pick some sounds to add to these pads. And actually random is the theme a little bit of today's tutorial. So I'm going to begin here, for example, with the percussion sample 40, drag that over and drop it onto an empty pad, and I'm just going to continue that operation until I've filled up all the pads. Just like so. And I'm now going to come over to my MIDI track and an empty clip slot and double click to open myself up a MIDI clip. And with the headphone icon clicked to blue here, I can now preview the sounds on the pads. In this case, again, I'm not too interested in that at this point in time. I'm actually looking for a little bit of unpredictable results. So I'm now going to, with the mouse, put in a little simple MIDI, 1-bar MIDI pattern here using all of the 16th notes available in this grid. So just like so. And actually, yeah, that's perfect. I'm going to leave it exactly as it is there. Now I'm just going to click down here so we can look back here at the whole project, and I'm going to click Impulse and play it so you can hear what that sounds like. So that's already, I think, rather cool without really having to pay too much attention to all the sounds. Now I'm just going to double click on the track to open up so we can see the Impulse instrument. If you're not familiar with Ableton's Impulse already, each pad inside of the Impulse here, the sample and pad has a corresponding, so we can play it from the top here, sections below which allow us to tweak and fine-tune each individual sound inside of the Impulse. So as we click through the different pads, this section here is related to each of those pads in the way, as I said, we can begin to fine-tune and shape the sound. On the right hand side of Impulse, these 3 parameters here, transposition, time and volume, they are global. So if we are to adjust those, they will affect all of the pads together in the instrument itself. So let's begin again by having the loop playing and just have a little bit of a play around in here with tweaking some of the sounds. I'm not going to go too far in to it, otherwise that would be a very deep rabbit hole, but I'll show you just some basic steps as to how you can begin to do that. So let's have this clip playing again, and if I pick on this pad here, for example, if I'm to left click the square and it turns red, that is actually muting that pad, and if I'm right clicking it and it changes to blue, I'm now just soloing that pad, so we're only hearing the results of that pad. So I can now come over here just so I can demonstrate bring its decay down, which is obviously making the sample a lot smaller. I can come over here and pitch it down a little bit. I can also time stretch it, which can create some rather cool results. And I could also even come over here to the panning, and we have lots of options here to randomize the panning a bit. So you can hear that's now moving around in the stereo field. I'm going to take the solo off and drop that back in. And I'm just going to pick on another sound. Yeah, this one's a good one. And again, maybe I'll just bring in a little bit of panning on that. And I might try pitching this one up a little bit. Okay, drop that back in. I'm now going to pick on this sound here, and some of the other controls we have inside Impulse pad by pad. I can bring in some saturation, which you can hear really drives some nice sort of grit into that sound. And I can also bring in the filter here, which in this current shape is a low pass filter. So if I'm to bring down this parameter, I can really roll off all the highs. So as I said, I'm not going to spend too much time working on that, but as you can see, there's a lot of ability here to fine tune all the individual sounds. I already like the result I'm getting here sound wise. And so the next thing I'm going to do, as I said, the theme today is a little bit about unpredictable results. So I'm going to come back over here to the left-hand side of the browser, click on the circle and arrow to open it up. And I'm going to come down into the section categories and MIDI effects. And I'm going to look for the effect here titled random. And I'm just going to click on that with the mouse, and I'm going to drag that down and drop it in front of the impulse. Now, what I'm looking to do with this random effect by placing it in front of the impulse, I'm looking for, instead of when the drum percussion loop begins to play, these this MIDI information plays very predictably up and down the notes that I've drawn in with the mouse. I'd like it to be a little bit randomized, the sequence of how the notes are going to play. I'm simply going to do that by using a little bit of the chance parameter and the choices. Now we have 8 pads here, so the choices can be dialed down below 8 or below, and the chance in this case will again randomize what's going to happen between how the sequence of these notes playing, and I can dial this to taste as we start to hear it play back. And for example, I'm going to begin perhaps with say 30%. The rest of this random effect I'm not really going to tweak at this point in time. Again, you can play around with it and fine-tune your results. So the next thing I'm going to do is click on with the mouse the random effect, hold down shift on my keyboard, also click on the impulse drum instrument. So they're both selected, Command G on my keyboard to group them together into an instrument rack. I'm now going to click on this little circle to the left here to open up the macro window of the rack I've created, and I'm now going to come over to here and map some macros, map some of the impulse and the random over onto the macros. So I'm going to choose on the global time of the impulse. I'm going to right click on that with the mouse and map that to macro 1. I'm going to also pick on the global transposition of the drum instrument, right click on that, map that to macro 2. And I'm also going to pick on the chance of the random MIDI effect, right click on the mouse and map that to macro 3. I'm also going to pick on the choices parameter, right click the mouse and map that to macro 4. So we now have some components of this instrument rack we've created over here on the macros. And once again, if you now have something like a push or a MIDI controller, you can go and map these parameters to the controller and now take advantage of being able to also manipulate those controls as the loop is playing. That, for example, could be, all of these could be turned into automation, playing over the length of your whole project, or you could actually now record this percussion loop to an audio track and manipulate those over time, recording the results. So for example, if I now start this loop playing again and I start to tweak some of these, you're getting these really cool pitching the whole percussion instrument up and down. Really nice results again by moving the time around, also tweaking the chance. It's going to randomize the sequence of those notes and also the choices parameter. So as you can probably see, that leads to a lot of possibilities along with fine-tuning all of these pads. made a drum loop earlier just to show you this example playing together with that. So if I now turn on this simple drum loop just to give you an example of the percussion loop, and now start again to move some of these parameters around. I think you can see there's a ton of possibilities there, and as always we can come over here to the instrument rack itself, click on it, Command R, and name it up, you know, cool perc impulse. And pretty much as I've explained in my other tutorials in the past, we can come over to the user library and then save that into a folder. So, you know, create ourselves a new folder, title it impulse. Oops, never was a great typist. And then come over here and drop our impulse inside of there, and then we have that for future projects. So obviously lots of possibilities with that. So in the end, folks, that's a wrap for today's tutorial. I think the impulse instruments, a lot of people inside of Ableton, a lot of people tend to not go there, use it often. I think it's great for little simple drum racks like this, little cool percussion instruments. You know, it's just got its 8 pads, but there's a lot of options there to randomize things, and the time stretch and transposition can have some really cool results with. So yeah, definitely don't ignore the impulse. And anyway, that's going to be a wrap for today's tutorial. I hope you found this helpful. If you have enjoyed it and found it helpful, please give it a thumbs up. And if you're new to this channel, consider hitting the subscribe button and follow the channel for some more upcoming tutorials all about Ableton Live. Thanks again, guys, and catch you soon. Ciao for now. Bye.